Hey, well, welcome, divas and dudes, to Powerhouse Bakery. Any of you that are new, I'm Suzanne Ryman, and I am the owner of Powerhouse Bakery. And, once I started this great little bakery, my whole goal was to really show the world that healthy can taste amazing and that we have so much that we can do with what we eat to really move the needle in our health and wellness. And so the last several weeks we've been looking at what happens with probably the most significant organ in our body that we know so little about. And when I was in college, we didn't even think of it as being an organ. It was kind of the unknown. And in fact, the whole world of nutrition sadly has not been revered as a very important part of the science of the medical community, which honestly is why I was always so disappointed to even call myself a dietitian, because they're like, oh, those ladies that run the kitchen, that's really what the dietitian was thought of. And lo and behold, one of my very first jobs was running a kitchen or a food production in a rehab hospital. And this rehab hospital was full of primarily older folks that were suffering from so many things. And it really discouraged me, honestly, that the medical community didn't embrace prevention better. And, over 20 years later, we're still in this spot where prevention is barely a glimmer. It's getting there, but it's barely a glimmer. And so I really hope that with programs like what ThriveWell does here with the Diva and Dude program, that we can really start to understand what we can do as patients, as, of course, the matriarchs and the patriarchs of our family, to really understand what can we do today that might make a difference in how we feel today, but also how we can improve and make a difference for tomorrow. And in my love of cooking, I really understood that there's so many ways to create food. You have a lot of you anyway, have gone through the journey over these last several years of what we've done here at Powerhouse Bakery and learning about different cultures and different styles. And it all boils down to, what is it about certain people groups that seem to do better than others? And how can we start to really mitigate that? As scientists, we want to figure out what's the magic bullet. Have we been able to discover a magic bullet? Not quite. But in the last few months, some really exciting research is starting to unfold, and we might just be at the tipping point of almost a magic bullet. In our research around the genetic mapping of the human genome, that's uncovered a lot of exciting information we've been touching on the last few weeks. And last week I really talked about how this discovery of the genetics that kind of are the human blueprint, it also has allowed us to look a little deeper into this biome. And this biome is this, again, unknown world of a bunch of bugs. In fact, I told you last week that we actually have more bacteria in our body than we do human cells. And only because they're so tiny can we actually fathom that even to be a possibility. And so when we think of the biome, it's sort of this unknown. It's sort of, well, what exactly is it? How can it be a bunch of things, a bunch of critters that seem to have some value, but we can hardly even see it? And now just recently are we able to even begin to study it. And last week I talked a little bit about just understanding our GI tract, because it dawned on me that a lot of us could just not be sure exactly what we're talking about when we kind of point this direction, And so I really wanted to back up and just kind of walk you through what exactly is this biome. And where exactly is it? And so when we think of the GI tract, we understand that it's quite a long tract. We start with the oral cavity, and I kind of mentioned that even in our teeth, we have some bacteria that do something, right? And gives our dentist and our hygienist job security. So that when we consume something, something else is consuming something that's left over in our mouth. So that plaque is an example that there is something going on in our mouth besides just chewing, mastication, and flavor enjoyment on our salivary glands, right? There's bugs going on, and happy that we're eating what we're eating because now they get to eat too. And so when we start in the mouth and then we go to the esophagus, and the next stopping point is the stomach. And what do we learn about the stomach? That it has a very powerful pH, and the pH is exactly the first step of killing bugs. Do you remember, if we think of the stomach, so GI tract, we go from mouth to esophagus to stomach, and then, right here is our first barrier. And we could even go so far as to say a barrier right before this. What do we always tell our kids to do before eating? Wash our hands, right? So now we've got our skin could be a barrier. And of course, washing our hands could now be an act that will kill the bacteria, just like that GI tract has a stomach that kills bacteria with the HCl. So don't forget, we can wash our skin. That will help to get safety, right, through our GI tract. But really, this is where our HCl starts to kill bugs. And then we get into our small intestine. And that's where a lot of digestion happens. What do I mean by digestion? Breaking down, yeah. So when we go to our best foods list and we think, okay, what proteins, what carbohydrates, what fats am I going to eat today? Really, that's just the big picture, and it melts down into the building blocks that our body can actually utilize to keep our body alive. And that would be amino acids, carbon molecules, aka carbohydrates that get broken down to sugars, and then of the essential fats that come from those fats. And, whenever I'm working with a brand new diva or dude and I start talking about these things and we talk about proteins and they get it, they'll say things like chicken and fish and turkey. And then carbohydrates, they go, oh, I don't eat carbohydrates. Those are bad for me. So I have to reinvent what that means. And then they get to the fat category and they're like, oh, well, I don't really know what fats I eat. I guess I eat butter and avocado, And so what happens is the fats are kind of in foods, right? And so one thing that I really try to teach is be very distinct about what your foods are, because ultimately it feeds our body. So from the small intestine, we get nutrients into our body, and we even start getting some more of the defense mechanisms, especially when we go further down the intestine to the large intestine. So when we talk about the biome, we kind of understand that, well, there is a whole host of critters that help protect us, even on our skin. We know that we carry bacteria on our skin. We even carry bacteria in our mouth. We even carry bacteria all through our GI tract. Yeah, some get killed right here, but some are certainly capable of surviving. And then you get to this whole new world. And if you think about it, the tube that brings the outside world to our inside tissues is really just a big tube from start to finish. And so each section of the tube has certain jobs that are being accomplished. And this large intestine is where we're finding that these bugs, we'll put it in quotes, actually we're discovering that has a lot more to do with health and wellness than we ever thought before. And that's where our discussion has really been focused. So what some of the newest research is all about is, what do these healthy bugs do in our body, and why do some people stay a lot healthier than other people? And remember, we also talked a little bit about how in infancy, how you're born into the world. There's certain people that that have difficulty in pregnancy, so C-section becomes the only way to have mom safe and baby safe. And then it started becoming even easier for doctors to control and maintain time frames and safety. So more and more people had the decision to have a C-section, like me. I had to have the first one. I chose to have the second one. And, unbeknownst to me, that could have some deleterious effects on how my babies were introduced to the environment as far as their safety. So what I want to talk about a little today is how this biome and how our genetics give us an internal immune system and even an external immune system that is learning from our environment. So if we think of this biome as being kind of a factory, this factory is going to help us build some tools to protect us from the environment. Because remember I mentioned even honey, and I love this example. We don't give babies honey, and that's because even though they're born with a great internal immune system or a set of tools, there are some things from our environment, so the environment, that they're not prepared for. And so over time, our bodies learn how to build an immune system. And a lot of where the body learns and builds an immune system is housed in our biome. And so that is where I feel like we are reaching a tipping point of so much exciting information that's happening. So I just put together a few slides, and I just want to kind of help you see that the anatomy of this incredible defense network is really where so much is happening. It's tissues and cells, organs that identify, track, and even remember these invaders, and then they store the blueprint of how to fight off these invaders. And a lot of where this is stored is in different places in our body. So now we've got an internal way to create, track, store, and remember how to fight the environment. And this biome is starting to be a really valuable tool in this whole process. Okay? And so, if we think about the team, who's the team in this whole fight? Well, I mentioned a little bit about the skin. That's our initial barrier. That's why we tell our kids to wash your hands before you eat, because that would be an easy way to get in. What would be another way to prevent bugs from getting into our body? Well, we're wearing masks, for example. But if we didn't even wear masks and we inhaled bugs, we've got some amazing mucous membranes that help to grab and kill or prevent the transportation of those bad bugs into our system. Then we have our army, the white blood cells. We have the filtering system, which is the lymph nodes. We've got the spleen, which is a storage depot and kind of a filtering network. Even the tonsils and the adenoids that are right there in our neck are there because they've got some immune cells, and it's kind of like a cage or a filter. And if our body recognizes something as foreign, those cells will be mobilized, capture that foreign cell, and trap it. And get ready to be exited in the body. But sometimes these storage depots, kind of like the jail, is where some of these are housed. And so in that picture of our gentleman there, it's giving you a good idea of all these places in our body that the immune system is at work. Take a note as well of that little insert of the small intestine. We've got the Peyer's patch. This is a very unique set of cells that again helps to recognize foreign invaders, create an army to kill off those foreign invaders, and encapsulate them to get rid of them. So right there in the small intestine. Bone marrow, we know all too well, right? What is made in our bone marrow? Yeah, red blood cells and all the different white blood cells. They're sort of as a blank slate, and I've used the Lego pieces before. Where you have when you're building something, you need a lot of those white squares in order to build your tower. And so before differentiation happens, those white little Lego blocks are kind of like the white blood cells that are made in our bones, and they begin to mature and change, and they're then stored in different parts of our body. So pretty cool. So this is where the innate versus the acquired immunity is really, I think, an important thought process. Barriers we've mentioned. Acquired as our immune system learns from our environment. So part of the beauty of interacting baby and mom and baby and environment, what is the first thing baby does when he's sitting and playing with things? Goes in his mouth, everything's in his mouth. And part of that is the body's need to learn what bacteria are in the environment. And so then these bacteria are evolved and focused and studied by our bodies, and especially that biome. Talked a little bit about the bone marrow. So here's a really good picture of it. And so ultimate factory of both our innate and our acquired immune system. So we're born with a lot of the basics, those white little blocks for the Legos. So those basic cells are ready to go, and then we also have the ability in that bone marrow to transform and translate from the environment. What kinds of immune cells do we need? And this is kind of cool too. The phagocytes. This is a type of cell that is going to grab and consume the foreign invader. So it's kind of like our first responders. They gobble them up, they digest them, they trap them, and that's really the way that the body is going to get rid of it, just digest it. And this is the kind of stuff that I studied in school, so this is not new. And it's really great when we realize that the electron microscope, is really not that old. And so this whole window into the human body is still pretty new. And so what I love is that, what we're talking about right now with the biome is kind of like when we first discovered what the electron microscope opened up to us, back in the 50s and 60s. And so we are just on a whole nother frontier, understanding how our body works in synergy with the bugs that live in our gut, and then how we feed them. So we always go back to, okay, what's the purpose, Suzanne? What you're telling me all this about my immune system, but how is it going to affect what I do today? And so what we're starting to understand is that a healthy immune system is going to be a part of inflammation. Are we all afraid of inflammation? Yeah, we oftentimes say inflammation is bad. Inflammation is something that we want to avoid. And that's really not true. Inflammation is so important. That's our body's way of having an innate immunity. It's going to be a way for those cells to encapsulate something that's foreign, and then basically the inflammation response is because the bad cell has been tagged, it's been flagged as something bad, and so then all the army comes in, scoops it up, and so you have this big overwhelming response, which is inflammation. Granted, sometimes this can get out of whack, or sometimes even be in response to something that isn't bad at all. Anybody have any allergies? Yes. So why is it that this beautiful system that our body has can have the ability to over-respond? And so some of the new technology that we're studying is all about how to turn up the immune system, like, open the gates and let the horses run, and that's a full-fledged immune response, or to pull it back and let it be kind of contained. And so that concept is really important because sometimes we want the immune system to be turned up. Sometimes we want it to settle down and quit making so much inflammation. So these phagocytes are an example of that response of our body. The killer T cells, this one is really exciting to me. A lot of the research is looking at how these natural killer cells actually work. And here in my picture, it's attacking a cancer cell. The white blood cell that learns how to latch on to an abnormal cell. This is where a lot of research is happening. We're even able to start to customize people's cells so that when there is a cancer that's found, we're able to put a flag on it, like a protein, and that flag will be the antigen, and it helps the body to identify it and attack it. Pretty cool. Some of these researchers are getting great response, like getting rid of all cancer by using this idea. And so, granted, we've got a ways to go, but when you get 100% success rate in some of these pre-testing, granted it's a small sample size, I think there was 14 people in this one study, and everyone got cancer-free because of this ability to train our natural killer T cells to do their job even better. And again, it's kind of giving them the blueprint with that flag that's being waved. So really cool stuff happening. And so the mast cells are another example of some of these innate immune cells. So mast cells and basophils. One of these is in the tissues and the other ones are in the blood. Don't worry about getting into the weeds too much, but I want you to remember these names a little bit, because they're going to start coming up in the news more and more. Understanding what role do these different types of cells play in our blood versus the tissues in fighting off these foreign bodies. The histamine reaction. Anybody remember what histamine is? It's when you're sneezing, runny nose, eyes watering. That's the reaction that your body's really setting off, this cascade of events to stop this foreign invader. So the cells discover an antigen and they release this histamine, bringing more of the army to the area, which is that redness and swelling. And the goal is to stop the spread of that invasion. So it's encapsulating it and getting it to stop. If the antigen is harmless, you experience something like allergies. Antigen is what? The thing that's waving, the pollen, right? The flag that's waving. And so why is it that sometimes our bodies can overreact to pollen? It's not really that big of a deal, body. Stop making my eyes run and my nose run and sneeze. But sometimes it doesn't recognize the cancer. And so cancer cells are amazing in that they can camouflage. So they kind of shroud themselves, don't notice me, don't notice me. And now research is able to uncover that by putting a flag on it. So it's really getting there. Oops. So here are the lymphocytes. So again, a really cool picture of what these cells look like. So the T cells and the B cells that keep a record of the invader are stored. So oftentimes in our thymus gland. So really cool ability of the body to store the memory of these different immune cells. That way they're quick to respond. So monoclonal research. So the monoclonal antibodies are where the research is starting to find more and more answers. So again, being able to clone the antigen outside the body. So it's one cell that's been reproduced outside the body and then given to people so that now their antibodies are able to respond quickly. So once your B cells get a read on that antigen of the new invader, it starts making the antibodies to kill it off. So again, it's that flag. Trouble's here. So you can see that cell, and then the blue color is the attacking of that bad cell. The customization is what's so cool. So basically what happens is a person's blood is taken out and it's broken down into all of the blood cells, the red and the white, and they're able to do, it's a lot of work and it's very expensive at this stage. So the goal, of course, is to make it more accessible for people, and it isn't so expensive, but it's certainly at the tipping point now that we know it's possible. The other challenge is that some cancers have a more identifiable antigen than others. So some of them will respond to this monoclonal research and others will not. So again, we've got some ways to go, but it's sure exciting to see the process. Here's another beautiful picture of the T cell. And these are actual pictures. So it kind of reminds me, when the pictures of the COVID bacteria, it was all over the news, and it just made it look so exotic, like a foreign invader. And, when you get down to this small level in our bodies, there's just a whole world that we don't realize is alive and well. And so understanding that there is an amazing infrastructure and surface, and that's how these cells communicate with each other, is surface interaction. So they travel through your blood and lymph systems, ready to be activated. The helper cells by their side. So basically, it's a way to turn on that killer T cell. So it's a team approach for sure. But that flag waving is the one that says, okay, this is the bad guy, come get me. This is a great picture too. So remember I mentioned the T cells, when they're immature, are made in the body, the bone marrow as a white blood cell, and then it goes into the thymus gland, which is in the chest wall, and it matures there. And so it's very close to the GI tract, it's very centered to the body. And when we see how the lymph system is very intertwined, it's like a freeway throughout our body. So all of the immune cells are traveling throughout the body, ready for action. So, I think a good question sometimes is, well, why do I have all my lymph nodes removed when I have cancer, when apparently the lymph nodes are where all these important cells are being held? So I had that question. And so what happens is the toxic cells hang out in that gland, in the lymph nodes, in the adenoids, hang out too long. And so then we have time that starts to run against us. And so those bad cells are kind of hanging out there for too long, and so they tend to replicate. And so again, why is that happening? We're not sure. But taking out the lymph nodes, the whole purpose is to take out some of those dirty cells that have been stored in those lymph cells or in those tissues. Okay. So as we're continuing to kind of look through some of the secondary lymph organs, remember these are the ones where we have the internal system for storing all those cells that are helping us to learn about our environment and be ready to act against all those foreign invaders. So the spleen area, anybody have their spleen removed? No? Good. It's again a storage house of our immune system. And the fear is that sometimes they can get overpopulated with toxins. Tonsils, I mentioned, the pyrus patches in the intestine. Sorry about that misspell. It's not Peter. Pyrus should have been a Y. These organs are all where our immune system can really study those invaders. And so the idea is that they stay there, and our white cells and our macrophage and the B cells can really learn about them. The problem is that if we don't have a good biome, a good system for regulating these lymph systems, then they get stagnant. Exercise is a really important function in the lymph nodes. Does the lymph nodes, or does the lymph tissue move on its own? No. Does the cardiovascular system move on its own? Yes. So when we exercise, our heart pumps blood, but our lymph system is labile. Our lymph only can move by moving muscles. So what's really important is that we move so that we can get the circulating lymph system going. And that gets out all the cobwebs, if you will. So those toxins need to get squeezed and moved out of the system and dumped into our GI tract. There's that biome dumped into the GI tract so that it now can be exited the body. So we're lucky that, of course, our heart does all the work for us, more or less, to get the blood flowing. But with the lymph system, we need our muscles to do the work. And again, here's another example of these beautiful memory cells. So once the B cells and T cells learn about a foreign body, so anybody ever get chicken pox? Yes. How many have gotten it more than once? No. And that's because it's a great example. It's a virus that has a really good, unique outer structure, and the body gets it once and then puts it into memory. So these B cells and T cells are kept in our lymph system so that if we come across that chickenpox virus again, we immediately are able to get rid of it. And it's amazing that this happens to us all day. I mean, we are interacting with bacteria and viruses all day long. And let's just say we don't always remember to wash our hands. We can touch our hair, we can touch our skin, touch our face, and bacteria easily is making it into our body. We're not even aware of how often we do it. Now, COVID has helped us be a lot more aware, right, of how much we touch our phone, our keys, our glasses, and then somehow touch things that are going to go into our body. But thank goodness we have first line of defense is the HCl in the stomach. Second line of defense is the biome that starts to really kill some of those bugs. But of course, the memory cells throughout our lymph system does so much to help us too. Okay. So the inflammatory process and the biome. This is where I really want us to get the rest of our talking points, because if we understand how to keep the gut healthy, our immune system is going to be more healthy. Now we're learning that the biome even produces those free radical killing cells. You remember what that's called? Antioxidants. So last week when we talked about how do we really nurture the biome, there's some very specific things, and that's what I want to spend the rest of our time talking about is, this is the last of our series. And so as we exit this series, what I want you to really think about is two things. One, we are learning so much about this organ and its connection with our immune system. Pretty cool. Number two, we have so much control over how we keep that part of our body healthy. Knowledge is power, and now we can act on that power. And that is really where I feel like is our ability to make some efforts. And as the scientists get better and better at defining what this customization looks like with the monoclonal antibodies, we are going to have so much exciting news to get to follow. And so as we think of gut health, so sorry. The first thing we want to remember is that with any amount of healthy behaviors, there's going to be some personal or some individualized variations, meaning that if you already have a predisposition to an autoimmune disease, so I have Graves' disease, so that means that I'm going to have a predisposition to having some things not work as well as others. But I still am going to follow the same pattern. If I'm a cancer survivor, I'm still going to follow the same pattern of habits, because that's going to be a wide swath of insurance. Okay? So when we think of gut health, the first thing we want to do is monitor our stress. So the more we have of anxiety and stress, the more we have hormones that cause the flight or fight. Remember, we talked a little bit about that in the gut. Anybody have ever feel butterflies in your stomach? Yes. And so that's actually dopamine that's being given off by your gut. And so it sets up a cascade of events in our body that make us want to run. And so it's a very stressful environment in our body if we have too much dopamine. Dopamine is created by our gut, but also we can modify how much we respond to that by having activities that help us dissipate some of those stressful hormones. And then we've got the big one that we've talked about so much here. And so when we go through the best foods list, what have we learned about gut health and the best foods list? We talked a little bit about this 2 weeks ago and how important the variety is of our food, and that helps with the diversity of our biome. So variety of food gives us diversity in our biome. So whenever I have somebody that says, oh, Suzanne, just tell me what to eat. I'll just, whatever you tell me, I'll just eat it. It's too complicated. I'll eat the same thing every day, I promise. Right? And I say, no, that's not what we want. We want you to enjoy your food. That's why your best foods list is different than mine, because your best foods are already good because you like them. Right? And then we start to take your foods from good to great by what? How we cook them. So diversity is what we're going for. The best foods list is going to vary, but we always want to take it from good to great. Right? And we do that by portion. What else? Cooking, the way the food is cooked, the company that the food keeps, and of course the quality of the ingredients. And this is so critical because as we start building this routine of our life over the, actually 30 years where we've really started looking at nutrition as its own entity for prevention. And now 30 years later, nutrition and medicine are starting to meet. And so I want us to be so equipped. Yep, did that. Yep, got that. Yep, got that. And so we have all our ducks in a row, so to speak. And when we think of our best foods, we're always going to look at ways to improve. I was just reading an article about the happiest people on earth are the Finns, Finland and Sweden. Have you ever heard that? And part of it is that, we don't need, there's like diminishing returns. When you have so much money, you can get to a point where it doesn't make you happy anymore. And that little sweet spot is you have enough to eat, you have joy, you have activity, and you have social connectedness, spiritual health. All of those get that happy scale as high as it can be. Sometimes when people have more than enough, what happens? Obesity, diseases of the lifestyle, right? Because now we have somebody else clean our house, somebody else do our yard work, somebody else wash our car, and then we pay to go to get a yoga class, right? And the yoga class is only an hour long, so that didn't give you nearly enough activity. And so it's funny how the cultures where we have the most wealth will oftentimes have the most diseases. Of course, it's not that simple, I get it, but when we start thinking of simplicity and what foods we have and going out to restaurants less, because do restaurants care about your health of your tummy? Oh no, right? No. They care about how much money they make. They want you very, very happy, so you'll spend more money. You'll tip the waiter and the waitress a good amount so their employees are happy, and you'll come back over and over. It has nothing to do with your health. So again, the whole world of nutrition is completely separate from medicine. That is changing because now the physicians are going, wow, I think it does matter how their gut is. I think it does matter what they put in their bodies. Yeah, we kind of get this, but this one's just been this conundrum. My entire career, I've been trying to convince people that what they eat matters, and even as a professional, I felt like I was a second-rate citizen because, nutrition, that's not that important. Just eat whatever you want. But take this medicine because it's going to cure you. Right? And now it's starting to change. That tipping point is truly happening because we're understanding that this biome has really some magic that we need to learn. And I call it magic because it seems so hard to imagine that trillions of tiny cells in our body have some great answers. So portion, cooking, the company that the food keeps, and the quality of the food that we pick is ultimately going to help that biome be healthy. And so if we look at the other components, in addition to eating healthy, we know we have to exercise. We've even talked a little bit about some of the other components. Sleep. How many get 8 hours of sleep? Some of us. Most of us, no. Some of us have difficulty sleeping, especially as we age. Anybody feel that? It's like, I want to sleep, but I can't. And so it's a feedback loop. And so what you eat and your ability to dissipate stress, how your biome is feeling, because remember we learned that our biome gives us what? We learned that this last week, that our biome does some really cool things. It helps to make the happy hormone. It also gives us, what's the supplement that sometimes people will take to help them sleep? So the happy hormone is serotonin. And the sleepy hormone is melatonin. Both of these come from our biome. 90%, this just blew me away. That's why I remember it. 90% of the serotonin comes from our gut. And that's what makes us happy. So the Swedes and the Finns are doing something right because they're the happiest people in the world. But part of being happy is feeling well rested. And so there's that wonderful loop. We also know that the biome produces the IPA. I always remember that because I know that's a beer, right? And tryptophan and tyrosine are amino acids. So coming from our best foods list, these turn into all those important hormones. Dopamine, epinephrine. And we talked about these a little bit last time. And remember, even like if you get a chill down your spine, remember that's a lot of dopamine. But then the body also needs to be able to scoop it back up and put it away. So there's flight or fight, and there's relax. So all of this has to do with a biome that is in good working order. It's healthy. If we have a problem with constipation or diarrhea or gas, if you know anybody that has IBS, what do I mean by that? Yes, irritable bowel. So the medical community used to say, that's just somebody that we don't understand. We're just going to put them into a big umbrella and we're going to give them Imodium and send them home. Now we're starting to realize, gosh, if we have somebody that has IBS, we understand that there's a whole cascade of things that are probably going on with this person. So now we want to back up and really understand what's going on in their gut. And so if we know that there's hydration issues, there's absorption, so much of this is happening in the gut, but we also know that there is hormone systems that can be dysregulated. And so that funky term is really why the medical community is starting to really pay attention to people that have irritable bowel syndrome. If you know anybody that has Crohn's disease, this is under that big umbrella. Or how about celiac? These are really chronic issues that started out with just some hydration problems and malabsorption because the gut has been diseased. And so we find that when it gets worse and worse, now it's in a feedback. The person is more stressed, they can't sleep well, they can't digest and absorb, they're getting dehydrated. And so it's a cascade of things breaking down. And so now we're starting to understand that this becomes something really important to treat sooner rather than later. We don't just send them home with some medicine. We start to really back up and try to understand more of the how and why. And still, gastroenterologists are struggling because they haven't really worked with nutrition. They're still in the world of what pills should we give them? And so that's why the research around cancers and other diseases, even like COVID and chickenpox, where the body has been able to learn and study these invaders and fix the problem by having this immune system be stronger and stronger. So we're sure hoping that that's going to give us more answers. The biome really became popular, or an area to study, when we realized that people that had Crohn's disease got better when they were able to go through the FMT, so fecal matter transplant. And so the world started to pay attention when it was a cause and effect. Somebody that had a healthy biome shared some of their bacteria with somebody that had a sick biome, and lo and behold, they got better. I mean, it was so cut and dry. Just like a lot of the mouse studies are looking at behavior changes. Mouse afraid of cat, mouse not afraid of cat. Take the fecal matter out of the one that's more bold and put it into the one that is normally afraid of cats. All of a sudden he becomes a super mouse and wants to beat up the cat, because that system is really been governed by some of the hormone systems that are happening in the gut. So pretty cool, right? So if we now look at our best foods list, I always like to give you the final plan. We've got lots of exciting things happening. I wanted you to understand how diseases seem to have so much center around our biome. We've talked about cancer quite a bit. We've also talked about diabetes, and heart disease seems to have a lot to do with the health of our biome. So now we just want to button it all up with what can we do. And all of you, I hope, have gone through some time with me learning about your proteins, your carbs, and your fats. We've talked about the building blocks that our body needs. Now I want us to really see, how do we make this list go from good to great? So you've heard me talk a lot about more plant-based foods. That doesn't mean you have to be a vegan. The reason why the plant-based foods are so promising is you can kind of kill two birds with one stone. You can get lots of amino acids and a lot of the soluble fibers. So what would be some examples of proteins? Fish, yeah, chicken, beef, eggs, quinoa, I love it. Yes. Okay, so that's perfect. We got a nice variety of, we call this land protein, and we've got eggs, quinoa, and cheese. What will be some examples of carbohydrates? Breads. Yes, there we go, Rachel. Potatoes, pasta, beans, greens, rice, fruit. Excellent. All right, what would be some examples of fats? Avocado, olives, nuts. I love how you guys are putting up the solid ones first. Impressive. Seeds. Okay, and then the oils and butter. Yes. I mean, let's just say this is already a beautiful list, and that's how smart you guys are. You didn't say ice cream. You didn't say chips. You didn't say sausage and bacon. So you got it. And the reason why we want to avoid the processed foods is because you can get at those essential amino acids, those I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Essential, I'll write this better. Essential fatty acids and essential amino acids. And the carbs, the carbon backbone. Because we know that if we feed our biome these important nutrients, our biome will not be dysfunctional. Instead, it's going to be very healthy. And now it's going to absolutely work hand in hand with our other immune cells that are made from our bone marrow and start to really be good, strong army that protects our body. And we know that the lymph system is going to be able to contract and move and get cleaned out by our GI tract, but also by our working muscles. And so now you're seeing why exercise is so important. And of course, the whole wellness paradigm starts to really center around what we eat. And so if we wanted to take these foods from good to great, and that's what I always try to teach you guys, your list is always going to be a little more specific probably, but you could choose perhaps a salmon instead of a white fish. You could choose a fresh instead of a canned. You could choose a frozen instead of a canned. You could choose any fish is better than none. Instead of eating it once a month, I'm going to eat fish twice a month. Right? Those are all ways of going from good to great. You can choose free-range chicken. You could choose air-chilled chicken. You could choose the whole chicken thigh. You could roast the whole chicken versus I never eat chicken because I don't like to take off the skin. Right? And so really thinking about what you've learned and how can you improve on your foods. It doesn't mean giving away all your favorites. It means partnering them up with better ingredients. Instead of doing fried eggs, maybe we could do a poached egg. Instead of eating quinoa that's just plain, maybe we add fresh basil and pumpkin seeds and olive oil and vinegar. We talked about the IPA, which is one of those fermentable antioxidants. What do I mean by fermented foods? Tempeh, kimchi. We could use yogurt, like I showed you in previous classes. We've got all kinds of fermented foods that right away make these foods go from good to great, because it's adding in some of the environmental bacteria that help our gut learn about our bacteria, help our immune system learn about our environment to make it stronger. As far as veggies, you can never go wrong, except once we start learning about pesticides and herbicides and how do they get into our food stream, it is again one more thing to think, oh gosh, now what are we going to do? We have to worry about the pesticides and herbicides on the veggies that we're trying to eat. So growing a garden, now you know exactly what's on there. Washing the foods, using organics more often because they have to be more strict. So again, if you save money in your food budget by not eating out and not buying processed pizza, instead getting a little bit more in your bank account for buying organic spinach, I think still you'll come out ahead with your overall food budget. I really do. And then again, I'm so proud of you all for picking the whole fats. We learned in the last, this was a few weeks ago, but figuring out a way to cook with no fats doesn't mean I never want you to use olive oil, because of course I love olive oil. In my home right now I have walnut oil, olive oil, and organic butter. Love them. But I also want to use nut butters on occasion because now we're getting more minerals and that helps to fuel the biome. The American diet is really low in minerals. So whenever we can add whole foods, the chances of having those minerals are so much greater. And the other thing is fiber. Whenever we can get whole foods, we are getting more fiber, especially in these two categories. And the fiber, when I go back to health of the gut, remember we talked about the first problem was, hydration. When people that have irritable bowel or problems with their tummy, they have constipation or diarrhea, their hydration is messed up, and that affects how well your body's able to get rid of waste products. So fiber helps our body maintain good hydration. Okay? So the next series that we're going to do, I'm really excited about because it's still going to be part of how the science world is learning to embrace nutrition more. Because, I mentioned when I've been a dietitian for so many years, and I was pre-med with all the pre-med students, 9 quarters of chemistry, all kinds of study throughout the human body. Where we diverge is I study more about nutrition, biochemistry of vitamins and enzymes. They go on to the other classes to learn about medicines. That's where we, diverge. What's exciting is now, because of so much interest and intrigue around those two categories starting to come back together, now the food industry is starting to take note, because of course the food industry cares when there's money to be had. And whenever the medical community starts looking around, the food companies start looking around. So the next series I want to do is going to be on food additives. So this is really where the rubber hits the road, because we've learned about our best foods list. You guys were awesome. You picked foods that were clean, clearly defined. We understand where the proteins and the essential fats are coming from, so excellent students. And the next phase is to understand, where did we go wrong in the past 30 years of making foods more convenient for us? And so we're going to pull out some specific food additives and try to understand. So we're going to follow the trail to understand what happened to them. A, why were they put in the foods in the first place? And B, what's the potential deleterious effect of those foods? You probably have heard of one really popular one. Have you heard of trans fats? Yes. The Center for Science in the Public Interest, CSPI, Center for Science in the Public Interest, is a public action committee that was really impressive. They are the organization that actually got trans fats to be out of foods, because they were able to, without equivocation, show that these foods were bad for us, foods that had this in there. What's another one? High fructose corn syrup. There's another big one. When my boys were little, and I used to take them to the store with me, and I'd always let them each pick out something. And one day I'd say, okay, today you get to pick something red. Today you get to pick something blue. Today you have to find something in a box, and so it would make them hunt and look at labels, but the only requirement was it could not have high fructose corn syrup and it could not have trans fats. And so it made them look at the label, think about it, so it was a great treasure hunt. But then we started going, okay, wait a minute, what is this again? Why is this so bad? Okay, it's fructose. And then there was all kinds of hearsay in the media. What makes this so bad? Is fructose? Does that mean fruit is bad? And I don't know if that even rings a bell in all the discussion that happened in the early 90s. And it kind of, again, came full circle. It's like, well, it's not like a cancer-causing ingredient. What made it so bad is it became this easy filler for so many foods. And then, without us knowing, we ended up eating a lot more sugar than we realized. So it was in barbecue sauce and ketchup and salad dressings and every kind of baked good. And it was a way to get a lot of sugar in every food possible. And you've heard me use the term food cocaine. And that just means it was highly addictive. We wanted some, and then we wanted more and more and more and more. And a lot of that was because sugars were in so much. And our natural tendency, part of being human, our taste buds are taught to love sweet. And so that's why we started loving more and more. And so food companies put high fructose corn syrup, and even trans fats were very easy because they were first thought of as just part of the fats in foods, until we started learning what the potential side effects were. So now what I want us to do in the next couple of weeks is look at some other food additives, see how they really change the food, maybe for better, for worse. There is one group, the Whole30 diet, that really looks at this, in general, the Whole30 looks at food additives a lot. So if you've ever followed the Whole30 diet, you'll see some of this discussion there. So I'm excited to get to transition us. We're always going to go back to how is science, the medical science and nutrition, really affecting our lives and what we're going to cook for lunch on Tuesday and dinner on Friday. So look forward to having you again for our next class. We'll see you soon.